What's the creepiest creature from your country's folklore? Number 1. Here in Norway, we have a lot of legendary creatures, but Draugen is probably one of the creepiest. Though descriptions of it tend to differ from place to place and story to story, the general concept of it is pretty much the same everywhere. Draugen is essentially the ghost of a person who has died at sea. He can be seen on stormy nights, sailing in the splintered half of a boat with shredded sails. His face is fish-like, with soulless black eyes and a wide gaping mouth, and he has kelp and seaweed for hair. Sailors and fishermen, foolish enough to head out to sea at night, may hear only its shriek before they are pulled beneath the waves, only to return as Draugen themselves, doomed to haunt the waters forever. Other Norwegian folklore monsters. Huldra, apparently a beautiful woman but with a tail, lures you into the dark forest where you die and is eaten by her in some accounts. Nukken differs from the Swedish version mentioned elsewhere in the thread. In Norway, he is a beautiful young boy who sits on stones in rivers playing the fiddle or flute, luring you to drown, as it is most often in streams with strong currents. He sits Fjøsnissen, essentially a leprechaun or goblin, lives on farms, fjøs, barn, and will help you to good harvests and healthy animals if you are kind and take care of your farm and him, often by leaving food out for him. If you are neglecting your farm or your fjøsnis, he will sabotage you, leading to even worse harvests and sick dead animals. Draugen, more modern brother of Draugen, this guy lives in your toilet pipes and takes bad children when they sit down to poop. Number 2. Here in Sweden, I think the two spookiest ones are Näcken, a naked old man that lives in rivers and ponds and plays a violin that places you into a trance. He then lures you into whatever source of whatever he lives in and drowns you. The second one is the Skogsrå, who'd be a lot creepier if it wasn't for the fact that she doesn't really do all that much. She looks like a beautiful woman from the front, but her back looks like a rotten tree trunk with a hole in it. She lurks near the edges of deep forests and tries to seduce men. If you treat her well, you'll be bestowed with luck. But if you treat her badly, you will be tormented by decease, disease, and death. What about my Lingar, though? Undead ghosts from infants murdered by their mothers that, well, depending on the version, do a bunch of different things. Haunt the places where they were buried with cries that could be heard at times. Ask to be given a name, since they were never baptized. Ask travelers to carry them to hallowed ground to be buried, an artist's task as the myling tends to grow bigger the closer you get. Or perhaps ask permission to breastfeed just one time. I'll translate the story of one from Bergslagen that's on Wikipedia. One tale from Bergslagen tells the story of an old crofter on his way back home from the tavern. He was greeted by a small boy with the words, "Grandpa, Grandpa, can I suckle?" The old man first refused the request, but when the boy kept asking his question, he finally answered, "If you have someone to suckle, then suckle, but you can't suckle me." After that, the boy left. When the old man finally got home to his cabin, he found his daughter dead in the pull-out couch with blood running from her breasts. The old man's answer let the boy take his revenge on his mother. The story tells, when the boy was allowed to suckle, he knew where to go. Number 3. Black Annis. In a grim, remote Leicestershire cave hewn with her own scraping, steel-clawed hands, the old crone Black Annis was said to hang the trophy skins of flayed children. A terrifying, lonely creature which lived in the branches of a gnarled great oak, the lone remnant of a long-dead great forest, Black Annis was thought to have been the husk of a forgotten, dark, pagan goddess. Number 4. The Will-o'-the-Wisp is a strange light that lures hikers off of trails until they are lost. It's not as terrifying, but pretty creepy. The folklore is possibly related to a real phenomenon in which people hallucinate when in the wild for long enough and can wander randomly off the trail. This is also linked to people seeing strange lights, particularly in swamps, in which there are bioluminescent insects and flora, as well as swamp gas. This myth has variations from several continents. Number 5. In northern Canada, there's a creature called the Wendigo. It used to be a person that once upon a time tainted her soul and ate human flesh. The Wendigo became so consumed with flesh after that it became insatiable. All attempts it makes at feeding itself grows the Wendigo and doesn't satiate it. They are said to have eaten their own lips because they just couldn't resist. As the legends go, you should be careful while walking the forests, as the Wendigo might capture you and eat you, but it won't just eat you in one go. It's used to hunger. It'll keep you alive as long as possible so that it has a food source for as long as it can during the winter. Number 6. We have a creature called a curry. It is known to wait near graves of people who have died on the moor. If you walk past one of these graves, it will latch onto you. It slowly convinces you of its existence over the course of weeks, if not months. First, you may hear a faint whisper in your ear. You may dream of it or feel a cool touch on the back of your neck. Over time, its presence will start become more known. It will grab your leg in the night, start attacking you in your dreams, transpose its face onto your family members as you're talking to them. It will never make itself known to anyone else, making you question your own sanity. It will start talking to you, asking you to go back to the moorland, promising you your freedom back if you do. Eventually, once the mental torment gets too much, you give in and wander back out to the moors. It will keep telling you you're almost there, allowing you to wander aimlessly around. Eventually, exhaustion will strike you, and you will be forced to watch your body succumb to the elements. As you lie there, unable to lift a finger, the curry tells you how much it will enjoy dragging your soul to hell. And like that, another grave is created. Number 7. I'm from Scotland, and we have quite a few. There are ones that I find not so much creep, but definitely odd, haha. Such as the Wolver. He was described as a man covered with brown hair on his body and having the head of a wolf. Though he was not malicious, apparently he was fond of fishing and would do so for hours, even leaving fish on the windowsills of poor families. And there is the Selkie, similar to a mermaid, I suppose. These creatures had the skin of a seal, but could shed them when they came to land. They often came to land to have children with the men there, only going back to find their skin and return to the ocean. Number 8. In South Africa, it is common for native Africans to sleep with their bed on top of bricks or other device to raise the bed. They believe in a creature called the tokolosh, which sits on your chest while you sleep and steals your breath, causing you to gasp for air or even die. This is how it was described to me by my parents, and saw multiple Africans' beds which were abnormally high off the ground. The beds are raised because the tokoloshi is really short, so he won't be able to climb onto the bed. Number 9. In Russian folklore, there is a character named Baba Yaga. She is an old woman who lives in the deep forest in a wooden house with chicken legs. She eats people who come upon her dwelling. She's supposed to have iron teeth and is as old as the world itself. She knows everything, and if you can survive her tasks and display proper respect and manners, she might let you ask a question. Her size varies according to the tale. Many say she takes up most of the room in her house, nose up the chimney, sleeping on the stove, feet against the door. Some say she looks like an overgrown hill with mossy trees and stones until it speaks to you. Her sons are dawn, noon, and night, and she may be the remnants of an ancient goddess like Black Annis. Number 10. Children and women would dance around a village fire, and during this process, everyone would write their names on rocks and place them in and around said fire. When the fire started to die out, they would all run home, whereas if they stayed, Yerhuchdu Guta, a bad omen that took the form of a tailless black sow with a headless woman, would devour their souls. Afterwards, men would go from door to door holding a mare's skull dressed as a ghost, decorated with jewelry and expensive garments. This being is called Mari Luid, and she is created to ward off evil. The reason these men would visit each house was to cleanse the residents' home so that they would be safe during the wintertime when food was scarce. By not tipping the guests, bad spirits would remain in the residents' homes, so the men sung, read poetry, and even danced, and the residents would then tip them with anything they had on hand: money, bread, beer, etc., and they would continue to do the same to the next house. With each house, they would become more and more jolly due to the fact that they would become progressively more intoxicated in the process. The following morning, a village elder would visit the dead fireplace around which the children and women had danced on the previous night. All the stones containing villagers' names would be checked. If, however, a stone was missing, the person who wrote their name on the stone would die within 1 year. Number 11. Hawaii, USA. Night Marchers. They're the spirits of ancient Hawaiian warriors. You can tell they're coming when you hear drums and see torches. To avoid them from killing you, you're supposed to avoid eye contact and take off your clothes and pretend to be dead, or just get out of these as fast as possible. I've also heard that if you have an ancestor marching in the party, you're safe. I always heard stories about them growing up and was terrified of running into them because I have no Hawaiian blood and I'd freak the hell out if I heard their drums. Number 12. Indian subcontinent, the Shirelle. A female ghost that appears as a beautiful young woman to seduce men. Once seduced, she transforms to her true appearance. A hideously scary old woman with backwards feet, unkempt hair, long saggy breasts, claw-like fingernails, long pubic hair, thick black tongue, and sharp teeth. Some Shirelles will simply kill a man and feast on his flesh. Others will suck his blood or semen, turning him into an old man or causing him to lose his virility. Usually women who die in childbirth or during menstruation and were ill-treated by her family will turn into a Shirelle. First, they get revenge on the family, and once the family is wiped out, they will target any young man. They can be found near cemeteries, abandoned buildings, or any dark, spooky place. Some parts of the Indian subcontinent take precautions to prevent women from turning into Shirelles. Young women that pass on may have special funeral rites. This might include nailing women's hands and feet when burying them and having her feet shackled in chains. Note that Hindus usually cremate their dead, so burying them instead is a big deal. Every Indian Pakistani knows someone that nearly fell into the clutches of a Shirelle. Number 13, Mothman. He's a creepy guy with glowing red eyes and hidden moth wings who walks along roads and neighborhoods at night. I remember a story of a mother playing with her family in their living room when she looked at the door window and saw him staring at them. When I was a kid, I would always shut the blinds on all of the windows in our house, but there was one window in the kitchen without blinds. So most nights I would either go to bed hungry or sprint to get food, because if I did pass that window and there was a man's face pressed against the glass, then I would become a shrieking puddle of piss, and that would wake my parents up. Number 14. Nikur, Icelandic nightmare horse. A horse that hangs around lakes. If you touch it, you are glued to it. If anyone tries to help you by grabbing you and dragging you away, they are stuck to you. The Nikur then walks into the lake and drowns you. Why? Because Nikur exists to fuck you up. In Ireland, we have a thing called the Kelpie. It basically looks like an average horse, but its mane is always dripping wet. It lures women and children into riding it, and when they get on, it runs into water to drown them and later eat them. Never trust a European horse. Number 15. Trinidadian folklore, the Sukuyan. I used to be scared she would come and get me at night. She's described as an old woman who can shed her skin and become a ball of fire or an animal you wouldn't suspect. She sucks your blood and can turn you into things. To spot a Sukuyan, you have to dump 100 pounds of rice at a crossroad, and she will be compelled to pick them up grain by grain. If you know who the Sukuyan is, you have to find her shedded skin and put salt in it before dawn. Her skin would shrivel up, and she won't be able to get back inside. Duins, these fuckers haunted my nightmares. They are children's spirits that died before baptism. They have no faces and their feet are back to front, heels facing forward. It still crawls my blood to imagine them with their backwards feet. They can steal children's names and lure them away from their families. It's funny to think of what scared me as a kid. I hated the Easter Bunny. I imagined a 6-foot monster bunny, so I always slept in my parents' bed the night before Easter. Number 16, in Mexico, maybe it could be El Nagual. A Nagual or Nahual, both pronounced Nahual, is a human being who has the power to transform either spiritually or physically into an animal form, most commonly jaguar and puma, but also other animals such as donkeys, birds, or dogs and coyotes. In English, the word is often translated as transforming witch, but translations without the negative connotations of the word witch would be transforming trickster or shapeshifter. It is said that some naguales still exist and snatch children to eat them. Number 17. There's a local legend in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which involves a mysterious and supposedly deadly sort of otherworldly creature. Some versions claim that it's a man-like shapeshifter, capable of blending in with the shadows as it stalks through the desert. Others describe the beast as being curiously canine in nature, albeit with 2 long limbs, black claws, and eyes that seem to burn like pinprick embers in the darkness. One thing that remains the same through every retelling, though, is the high and eerie keening noise it's said to make when it hunts down its prey. One evening when I was about 11 years old, I heard it. I had been lying in bed, reading beneath my covers with a flashlight, when a mournful howl pierced the air from somewhere across the moonlit sands. My first thought was that it had been a coyote. But as the sound echoed through the night for a second time, I felt a shiver of panic flash up my spine and a deep weight of dread coalesce in my chest. That evil wail was not the call of anything I had ever encountered, nor of something that should have even existed in the waking world. It was the cry of a nightmare incarnate, and no amount of reason or rationality could shake me of that notion. Now, at around the same time as this story, I'd been doing my best to foster a reputation for being an independent and unflappable badass. That goal went swiftly out the window as the screeches seemed to draw ever closer, and I quickly ran from my room to seek the protection of my parents. Upon reaching their door, though, I was presented with an even more terrifying discovery. The howls were coming from inside the house, along with a lot of heavy breathing and the occasional whisper. I couldn't look my mother in the eye for a week. Number 18. My very sane, non-paranormal believing So used to see this creepy, short, troll-like creature in his room in a house he lived in, only there. He said it looked like a short troll with a huge nose and giant gaping smile that would just stare at him. He chalked it up to hallucinating, but one day I heard about a pukwudgie and all my hair stood on end. A pukwudgie is a 2 or 3 foot tall, 0.61 or 0.91 meter, troll-like being from the Wampanoag folklore. Pukwudgies' features resemble those of a human, but with enlarged noses, fingers, and ears. Their skin is described as being a smooth gray, and at times has been known to glow. Details from the SO. It felt like a year, but probably wasn't. It felt like something I semi-got used to, long enough for it at least. I shared the room. My sister had a bed across from mine, and my parents slept in a large bed in the middle of the room, closer to where it would appear. I can't recall, but I don't think my parents were ever in the room when I would see it. And I can't remember if my sister was, but I imagine she was, and was sleeping. I recall times my mother popped her head in, and it would be gone immediately. Number 19, Native Americans have a lot of shit that'll fuck up your day. In Oklahoma, I heard a few. One was specifically about some land my uncle had bought. There is a bend in the creek that's insanely deep. Easily 15 feet, which is super odd considering it's knee-deep just a bit up the creek as well as just a bit down. Apparently it's been like that for years. The land was well known as it had a school on it a long time ago. I met one guy who went to school out there as well as lived there. He was able to tell me about a bunch of the landmarks as well as point in the direction of several new ones we hadn't seen. He also told me about the bend in the creek. He said it was a portal to another world. He said while hunting one day, he had shot a deer. Following it, he found it on the bank of the creek, and it sprung up and jumped right into the middle of the bend and never resurfaced. As he stood there waiting, he kept hearing laughter until he could finally make out the figure across the water as a little person mocking him. When he started to move, the little person leaped into the water and disappeared as well. He also talked about the deer woman, but that was like a bad fairy tale to keep your children in line. It was like a centaur, but half deer, half old woman. When a child misbehaved at any type of ceremony, the deer woman would stalk them in the woods until finally taking them and eating them. Number 20, Turkish here, but I guess it is more related to Islam than country. We have jinn, and it is nothing like the Robin Williams. According to folklore and religion, there are good ones and evil ones. Good ones mostly Muslim, so they don't bother you. Evil ones mostly don't believe in God. So if you say jinn, they are drawn to you, and sometimes they haunt you just for fun. They don't have a specific shape because they can shape shit. but most noticeable feature is their feet are backwards. They live next to walls, abandoned houses, bushes, and trees. When you have to pee at night, you shouldn't pee at those, or they will get angry and haunt you. They are from another plane, so normally invisible, unless they want otherwise. It is always told that they like to toy with people. They like burning people, possessing people, even raping the beautiful young girls. They target people who don't believe them and who believes them, and but terrified of them. Some people claim to have power on them. These things can know everything about a person by just looking at one of that person's belonging. They can travel huge distances in a blink. There's some verses from Quran that can make them keep distance depending on the creature's power. And I had a teacher, also friend of my father, who allegedly was perfect at fending them. According to his stories and his wife's words, he tried to send away a group which haunted a girl. He thought he managed until the next day. One remained and tried to suffocate his newborn son with telephone cable. Wife says phone was flying, glasses were flying and hitting them, and there were noon in the house. Eventually he managed it. I happened to saw a similar thing when I was 7. But I still don't know it was a dream or reality after all these years, but I still get the goosebumps thinking of it. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the stories. If you enjoyed this video and would like more, please like and subscribe. I upload twice a week or more, and your support will truly be appreciated. Thank you, and have an amazing day.